Text of Zhang Ailing's short story Legacy of the May 4th Movement on the Small Boat. Two men and two girls sat opposite each other under the flat top awning edged with light blue cloth ruffles. There is a low table in front of the knees, and in front of each person is a teacup, a handful of melon seeds, and a lot of water chestnut shells. They were eating water chestnuts, and their dark purple lips were wrapped with white teeth. "Miss Jo is so fashionable today," said one of the men. "It is also fashionable to call an unmarried woman Miss." Miss Jo gave him a stern look from behind her new glasses and threw a water chestnut shell at him. She wears round black-framed plain glasses because her eyes are not short-sighted. It was 1924, and glasses were in fashion. Social celebrities wear glasses, newlyweds wear blue glasses, and even the prostitutes in the bacon shop wear glasses and pretend to be schoolgirls. The two men each sat side by side with their girlfriends, because the weight of the two men was more evenly distributed. It's rare to tell a joke, and the target of the joke is always the friend's lover. The two girls were about 20 years old, and they were considered young among the top students in the girls' school at that time. At that time, progressive women were pouring into junior and senior primary schools in large numbers. Everyone admires Ms. Jo's liveliness and boldness and thinks she can represent the new woman. Mijan's style is the beauty of still life. She sat there with a smile on her face and rarely spoke. She has a narrow, slightly pointed oval face, with bangs in front of her eyebrows, and two buns, one on each side. She wore a light application of makeup, a black silk gerber skirt tied high, a slender waist and trumpet sleeves, a snow-green silk jacket with black diamond and dog-tooth edges, and a white silk scarf round her neck. There is nothing on his body, except for a gold watch on his wrist and a gold fountain pen on his lapel. Over the past 1,000 years, Westlake has been a place where celebrities and beauties visited, and there are too many overlapping memories. Even if the women visiting the lake are wearing the latest clothes, when reflected in the scenery of the lake and mountains, there is an abrupt sense of incoherence between time and space, as if they belong to another era. The lake water looks thick and a little filthy, but it seems to have a lingering fragrance of powder, which is the face water of famous prostitutes in the former dynasty. Among the two young men, the slender one was named Luo, with a long face and a light-colored familiar Luo gown hanging from his body, giving him an airy posture. He and his friend surnamed Gu both taught in a middle school along the lake. They both used teaching as an excuse to live in Hangzhou. There are not many hours in charge, so you can spend all the time wandering around the lake in the morning and evening. The two had similar interests and were both interested in new poetry. They once published a collection of poems together, so they often called themselves poets on the lake in a half-joking tone, referring to themselves as Wedgwies and Coleridge. Miss Jo was originally Gurjun's distant cousin. She went to school in Hangzhou, and her family asked Gurjun to take care of her. Gur invited her to dinner and lake tours. She also brought her classmate Miss Fan, and twice Gur also invited Luo to go with her. So everyone got to know each other. Since then we have seen each other almost every day. As they became familiar with each other, the two girls would often go to the dormitory to see them together. And then as usual they would take newly published books and periodicals to the lake, eat out, and if the moon was good at night, they would go to the lake at night, rowing to a quiet place. Luo or Gur opened a book and recited Shelley's poems under the moonlight. Hearing the irritation, Miss Shu held Miss Fan's hand tightly. There were always 4 of them. Sometimes a couple would be added to make 6, but never two together. This has been going on for almost a year. Both Gur and Luo were married, a common problem among men at that time. Almost everyone has never heard of the term love and has already married and had children. The relationship between Gur Luo and his 2 girlfriends can only be affectionate but polite, but they don't feel depressed because of it. The two of them often discussed each other with gusto behind their backs, and the words and smiles of the two opposite sexes became the material for them to make fun of each other. In addition, based on the writing style of their letters, they studied their personalities. Although they met every day, they still communicated frequently, but they were just elegant letters of friendship and could not be called love letters. They could tell from the calligraphy and wording that Miss Joe's generosity and Missy's subtlety have been analyzed meticulously for a long time, and it is impossible to make any new discoveries. However, they still communicate with each other diligently, comment on topics, and praise their friends' lovers without hesitation. Privately, they are glad that they have a more beautiful wife. Better than that, they never tire of this kind of talk. In China at that time, love was a completely new experience, and just this little bit was enough. The boat sailed into a lotus leaf, and a big green plate with yellow dots rubbed against the side of the boat and made a rustling sound. Then there was silence. The boatman and his little daughter leaned on the oars motionless, letting the boat drift by itself. Occasionally, I heard the sound of porridge in the lake, as if there was a piece of candy in my mouth. "Are you going back this Saturday?" Miss Fan asked. "I probably won't miss it this time," Luo replied with a smile. "If you don't go back, my mother will make trouble." She smiles. Even though he blamed his mother, the reality was that he still returned to his wife. Every time Luo goes home these days, he always feels more and more sorry for Miss Fan. Before and after returning, Miss Fan's unhappiness gradually became more obvious. She only asked this question that day, and it already gave him a deep stimulation. When the boat arrived at Pinghu, Miss Joe went ashore to buy lotus root starch, and Goer accompanied her there. Luo and Miss Fan leaned against the red lacquered railing and waited, the two of them remaining silent. "I have made up my mind," Luo whispered suddenly, looking at the lake. Then, seeing that she didn't ask him what his determination was, he added, "Miss Fan, will you agree to wait for me? It may take several years." She lowered her head, turned around, and curled her left corner of her clothes with both hands. She did not verbally agree to his divorce that day, but that night the four of them had dinner in the building outside the building. Luo already felt that this could be said to be the night of their love, and at the same time he felt that he had devoted himself to a kind of struggle. The wine I drank that night tasted strange, like the last glass of wine for a traveler on a cold night before setting out on the road. Although the name of the building outside the building is very poetic, facing the lake on three sides, and the scenery is indeed good, the restaurant itself does not. Pay attention to the appearance. With simple window frames and greasy old furniture, the restaurant has a loud voice to the kitchen downstairs, singing the name of the dish. After the large glass cover on a plate of boiled shrimps was open, two shrimps jumped on the table, jumped in and out of the soy sauce dish, and finally landed on Miss Fan, dripping with dye on her light-colored jacket. A line of soy sauce traces. Miss Joe screamed. Under the dim light, Miss Fan blushed and looked very happy, as if she didn't seem to mind. Luo didn't go home until the following Saturday. It was a village not far from Hangzhou, less than 2 hours by train and with a wheelbarrow. Upon arriving home, his mother loudly announced to her daughter-in-law all the tasks for the day because her husband was back. The daughter-in-law felt embarrassed instead, probably because she was not sure whether he would come back or not. She put a blue cloth blouse on top of her silk jacket, faintly revealing the bright red satin piping inside. That night he asked her for a divorce. She cried all night. The situation was so unbearable that it was as if a judge were sleeping in the same bed as the criminal he had sentenced to death. No matter how he defended himself, he knew that he was condemning her to lifelong widowhood, and a dishonorable widowhood at that. "Which of the 7 rules have I violated?" she asked him while sobbing angrily. His mother found out the next day and lost her temper and refused to mention it again. Luo returned to Hangzhou and never went home again. His mother asked his uncle to come to Hangzhou to find him and persuade Xiaoyu in every possible way. He also tried to ask a cousin to go to the countryside to communicate with his family on his behalf. Entrusting relatives to handle negotiations has always been a waste of time, and relatives can only convey good words on behalf of others. It is unreliable for them to convey words of rupture, because everyone considers themselves peacemakers, especially when it comes to marriage. Breaking up other people's marriages will harm the yin and the yang. Law hired a lawyer to write a scathing letter to his wife. The family just ignored him, but his wife's family was so angry. that they threw their fists and arms and said, "The Luo family is to bullying. Do you think all of our Zheng family are dead?" They wished they could mobilize troops to attack the Luo family and demolish the house. The heartless kid dragged the old woman out and beat her half to death even though she was not at home. He just waited for his aunt to hang herself with a rope on the door frame of Luo's house, so that he could take revenge for her. However, everyone has his or her own opinion on this matter, so there is no need to push for it. There was a lot of discussion in the countryside, and they all treated it as news. The patriarch of the Luo family couldn't see it and said something. "Unless he hides forever and never comes back. As soon as he steps into the village entrance, tie him up immediately, go to the ancestral hall to ask for a monk, and beat this beast hard." What a shame! Luo and Miss Fan still meet every day, and the four of them are always together when they meet. Gur and Ms. Zhou admired their desperate courage, constantly encouraged them and were excited for them. The fact is that it makes Gur very embarrassed. Although Ms. Zhou did not complain explicitly, it still embarrassed him enough. Until now, there was a sadness in their feelings for each other. And it was this sadness that made their delicate relationship even more beautiful. But now, it seems that this is not irreparable by human power. Luo went back only once in 2 years. His mother was ill and called him back in a hurry. When he saw that the illness was not as serious as he said, he already understood in his heart and just expressed his relief. His mother took the opportunity to persuade him a lot, but he didn't respond. He also ignored his wife who was delivering soup and medicine, sleeping in the study at night. His wife suddenly opened the door and came in, wearing gold and silver, dressed in wedding clothes, and imitated Bao Chan's wine delivery and brought him snacks. The two of them started to quarrel without saying a few words. His wife said, "Your mother didn't force me to come. I really don't want to come. She scolded me and cried to me." She left in anger. Luo Yi was so angry that he returned to Hangzhou early the next morning and stayed there for another 2 years. His mother missed her son and gradually regretted it. It was her birthday this year, and Luo was persuaded by her uncle to come back to pay her respects. During this meeting, his mother did not try to match up her son's daughter-in-law. Instead, she deliberately moved her daughter-in-law away to prevent her son from feeling embarrassed. Although the daughter-in-law complained that her mother-in-law forced her to go to the study last time and suffered a humiliation in vain. Now that she is isolating them, she feels resentful in her heart and suspects that her mother-in-law has changed her original intention and has gone to that side. In the past few years, there have only been mother-in-law and daughter-in-law at home, and everyone has been feeling unhappy. Once the mood is bad, daily friction will naturally increase, and unknowingly, hatred will gradually be directed towards the other party. The old lady, on her part, determined that her daughter-in-law wanted her to die, a daughter-in-law who had done anything to her parents-in-law and paid filial piety would never be able to divorce and return to her parents' home. The old lady swore that she would not die. She wanted her daughter-in-law to go out straight first, and then she would go out sideways. On the surface, it seems that the divorce negotiations have been going on for 6 years and are still at a stalemate. The Miss Fan family always disapproved. Now they remind her day and night that a 26-year-old old girl can turn into 30 in a blink of an eye. And no one wants to fill houses. Luo's blind procrastination seems to have bad intentions. When no one wants him in the future, he will have no choice but to be small with him. Whether he is going through a divorce or not is also very suspicious, and one cannot believe his words. Or maybe the crux is that he can't afford alimony. After asking round, someone said that the Luo family had no money at all. The little property in his hometown is in the hands of his wife, and it has long been unreliable. He was teaching in Hangzhou, and because of the divorce incident, the principal had some objections to him, which made him very unhappy. If he doesn't make a living by teaching, then why doesn't he resign? Miss Zhou secretly told Gur that someone was matchmaking for Miss Fan, and the target was a pawn shop owner. On the day of the blind date, they had a meal together at Fancy restaurant. She repeatedly told Gur Zhen to keep it a secret and not to tell Luo. Gur felt very sorry for Luo, but finally told him. But of course I added a sentence. This is all done by her family. Did she be tied up and sent to the restaurant? Or did she walk in on her own? Luo said with a sneer. Don't mention it when we meet later. Everyone will be embarrassed if I expose it. Even Miss Zhou will blame me for talking too much. Luo agreed to him. But that night Luo Duo drank a few glasses of wine and happened to have dinner in the building outside the building, which brought back many memories. At the dinner, Luo suddenly raised his glass and said loudly to Miss Fan, Miss Fan, congratulations. I heard that we will be invited to a wedding banquet. Gur tried his best to interrupt, but Luo stood up and shouted, congratulations. I'd like to give you a drink. He tilted his neck and drank, pushed the chair away, and went downstairs into steps. Gur and Miss Zhou looked at each other in confusion. Gur was not allowed to leave the stage, so he could only keep saying, he is drunk. I'm a little worried, so I went to take a look. He then went downstairs and caught up to try to persuade him. Miss Fan did not come the next day. She is angry. Luo wrote letters, but all were returned. A week later, Miss Zhou came to report again, saying that Miss Fan had gone out for dinner with the pawn shop owner again. This time everything was settled, and the man bought a large diamond ring as an engagement ring. Luo's divorce has been brewing quite maturely, and the woman is gradually showing signs of being willing to negotiate. If he suddenly gave up and returned to his wife at this time, he would definitely become a lifelong laughingstock. Therefore, he continued and paid his wife a considerable amount of alimony according to his promise and agreed to divorce. Then he immediately called the matchmaker and went to Wang's house in the city's dye house to arrange a marriage. The eldest daughter of the Wang family is famous for her beauty, and everyone who has seen her recommends her as the best in the city. After exchanging photos, the Wang family investigated the man's family background. The matchmaker bragged so hard that she actually told him about the marriage. Luo sold a large part of his property and bought Miss Wang a diamond ring, which was larger than the rumored diamond ring of Miss Fan. Within 3 months, he married Miss Wang. Miss Fan's marriage didn't work out for some unknown reason. Maybe the pawn shop owner still doesn't trust new women. And I heard that Miss Fan once had a boyfriend, and the relationship was very close. According to the Fan family, it was because they discovered that the pawn shop owner underreported his age by a few years. According to some light-tongued people, the opposite is true. Underreporting of age does occur. Luo and Miss Fan live in the same city, and it is logical that sooner or later they will meet accidentally one day. Their friends refused to let things take their own course. For some reason, they felt that these two people had to meet again anyway. They were not grieving for Luo and hoped that he would have the opportunity to taste the sweet taste of revenge. They did not approve of his hasty marriage and sacrificed their own ideals in order to get revenge on her. Maybe they wanted him to wake up and regret what he had done. But perhaps the most reasonable explanation recently is their sense of beauty. They just think that it is sad and beautiful for these two people to meet again in the moonlight on the lake. So it is a good thing and they can't help but promote it. Everything was arranged, hidden only from the two of them. One day Gur accompanied Luo to visit Yahoo Lake. Miss Zhou was married and no longer associated with them. Someone from another boat shouted to them. It was a couple they knew well. There was also Miss Fan on that boat. The two boats merged, and Gur stepped onto the boat and called Luo to come with him. Luo found himself sitting opposite Miss Fan. The tea in the glass shimmered slightly, and the water surface of each cup was a silver disc, swaying gently with the rocking of the ship's hull. Her face and shoulders in white were tinged with a blue edge by the moonlight. There were so many changes in people and affairs, but she was exactly the same as before, without changing at all. This made him unable to understand it no matter what, and he only felt in a daze. They exchanged pleasantries, as if nothing had happened, but never exchanged a word directly. No one mentioned Luo's recent marriage. Everyone was talking about the West Lake Expo sponsored by the government, and unanimously opposed the ugly and eye-catching memorial tower standing on the lakeside. It's so vulgar. It completely ruins the scenery in this area, Luo sighed. Anyway, the sentiment like before will never be the same again. When his eyes met hers, they trembled slightly and looked away. They took a circuit on the lake, landed at Xiling Society, and took rickshaws back. The next day Luo received a letter, and he knew it was Miss Fan's handwriting. With his heart beating wildly, he tore open the envelope and pulled out a blank piece of paper without a word on it. He immediately understood what she meant. She wanted to write to him, but now, what else could she say? The news of their renewed romance could not be hidden from anyone, and soon everyone knew about it. Luo went through divorce again. There were very few people who sympathized with him this time. He used to be regarded as a trailblazer, but now he has become a bad guy who plays with women. This divorce was another long struggle. Miss Fan is also struggling. The object of her struggle is the erosion of time and men's nature of liking the new and hating the old. And she was struggling alone, with no one standing by her side to encourage her like she was standing by Luo's side. Because her battle is fundamentally secret, and if the result is successful, it must be unnoticed and no trace of her efforts can be revealed. She still maintains her beautiful appearance. Her hair and clothing were carefully researched, a subtle compromise between popular styles and memories. He never wants her to change. He wants her to be exactly the same as when they first met. However, a man's psychology is contradictory. If one day he suddenly finds that she has become old-fashioned and outdated, he will also feel surprised and sad. She catered to his every state of mind, rather than just being submissive. She read all the books he gave her from cover to cover. She worshipped Shelley for 10 years. The Wang family firmly opposes divorce. If a peaceful settlement is not possible, the matter will have to be taken to court in the end. Litigation costs money. The more eloquent the judge, the more money it will cost. After spending 5 years of hard work and losing everything, I finally won the lawsuit and got a divorce. Although he was embarrassed, he still built a small white house by the lake, exactly according to the layout he and Miss Fan planned. And it was located in the ideal location they had chosen for a long time, in the quiet Lihu Lake. The house in the country has been partly rented out and partly empty since his mother's death. The new house leans against the green hillside toward the center of the lake, standing on stilts in the water. The walls are covered with crimson roses and purple wisteria flowers, hanging upside down in front of the moon cave window. The newlyweds visited relatives as usual, and the relatives invited them to eat and play mahjong as usual. Luo knew that she didn't like playing mahjong. Occasionally, she is perfunctory, because she is wise, but it seems that there is no need to make an appointment with the original cast to come back for another 8 rounds tomorrow. She told him that she was too embarrassed to refuse, and people laughed at her. That the loving couple could not be separated for a moment. She complained that they lived too far away. I went out to play cards and came back late. I couldn't get a rickshaw. The rickshaw driver didn't want to go to that lonely place in the middle of the night. I couldn't make any business when I came back. It was her turn to invite the guests, but because it was inconvenient for the guests to go back, they had to stay up all night, and Luo found it too noisy. When there was no card game, she would lie in bed at home all day long eating melon seeds. She didn't bother to change her clothes. She wore a dirty old gown and didn't mend the torn forks of her gown. When the ties were torn, she pinned them with a pin. When she went out, she still wore the same clothes as when she was a bride. Bright red and green, which made her face look more yellow and thin. Luo felt that she was a completely different person. He tactfully advised her to pay attention to her clothes, and skillfully started by complimenting her previous modest dress. She ignored him at first, but after he spoke too many times, she lost her temper and said, "Mother-in-laws only care about women's business." No wonder people say that men like this are the least promising. Luo still had to save face in front of his friends. But the news that they had been quarreling for 3 days, or to probably still spread, because one day a relative mentioned Miss Wang to him. And as if in casual conversation, he mentioned that Miss Wang had not remarried yet. "Actually, why don't you take her back?" Luo smiled bitterly and shook his head. Of course, Luo also knew that although the Wang family hated him for being unlucky, and had been fighting lawsuits for many years, and the hatred was as deep as the sea, they still wanted their daughter to stay together, and it was better than remarrying anyway. As long as Luo reveals the truth, enthusiastic relatives will come forward to help him on his behalf. By the time the wind reached Mrs. Fan's ears, everything had already been settled. Although the wife of the family cried and claimed that she wanted to commit suicide, she still came to entertain the day when the Wang family escorted their young lady back to the Luo family. There were no guests that day, just a few people from my own family celebrating informally. She calls Ms. Wang's brother and sister-in-law eldest brother and sister-in-law. Jin said that the food is not good. I live too far away, so it's not convenient to buy food, and I can't hire a good cook. The house is too small, not enough to live in, otherwise I would have been there early. I persuaded him to take your young lady back. Of course you should come back. You can't live in your parents' house all your life. Miss Wang was as reserved as a bride and didn't speak. But her brother and sister-in-law were very polite and tried their best to deal with it. The Wang family had put forward conditions beforehand, no matter how big or small. And no title. Because Miss Wang was young, she would suffer the disadvantage of being a sister. They only call each other Fan families and Wang families behind their backs. Shortly thereafter, an elder of the Luo family said to Luo, "Since we have brought the Wang family back, why don't you bring your first wife back? It's unfair to let people say you are unfair." Luo couldn't think of any reason to object. He went to the countryside to pick her up from her parents' house and moved her into a small white house covered with roses by the lake. His two divorced wives are richer than him because they received a large amount of alimony from him during the divorce. But they never wanted to help him, even though he was very poor, and had to support 3 women and their servants, and later their children and their wet nurses. He thought back to how he treated them and felt that he couldn't blame them very much. But the Fan family kept sarcastic and said that they didn't care about his life or death at all, which made him feel embarrassed. Now that he has finally gotten through it, people's attitudes towards divorce have changed, and all kinds of criticism and ridicule have cooled down. On the contrary, many people envy his rare beauty. This was already 1936, a monogamous society in name at least, and he was swimming on the lake with his 3 lovely wives. On the rare occasions when he complained to his friends twice, his friends always made fun of him and said, "At least you don't have to find someone else to play with. It's just a table of mahjong behind closed doors." 1957.
Alright, this story has come to an end. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you.